What is that? What is that? Oh no. It's happening. It's happening. I just wanted to apologize that I've never reviewed the Blair Witch Project before. I know a lot of people don't like it. I know a lot of people do. It's all my fault. I'm sorry. The Blair Witch Project was released on July 14th, 1999, and was written and directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. It tells the story of three amateur filmmakers named Heather, Mike, and Josh, who get trapped in the woods outside of Burkittsville, Maryland, and discover a sinister force therein. So the Blair Witch Project is a pretty iconic horror film, and a lot of people love the Blair Witch Project, and a lot of people hate the Blair Witch Project. So today I wanted to talk about the infamous film, The Blair Witch Project itself, and kind of everything that surrounds this film. Because I've seen this film a couple times. I just rewatched it in preparation for this review. And my initial thoughts when I originally had seen it weren't very positive. I thought the film was boring, it dragged, it didn't have enough to offer when I originally saw it. I rewatched it, and I have a whole new appreciation for the film, and I want to talk about why there is this big debate whether people love or hate this and consider it a horror classic or not. So as you all know, this film came out in 1999. It turns 20 today, and it is one of the main catalysts that really started the found footage phenomena in horror. It made it really big time with films like Paranormal Activity and Cloverfield, but Blair Witch was one of the originators of this style of filmmaking. Though the real originator was an older film called Cannibal Holocaust, far more gorier and more graphic than Blair Witch is, but it did start that trend. Blair Witch had a really great marketing scheme when it came out because they tried to convince audiences and filmgoers that this was a true story. And from the very beginning of the Blair Witch Project, the filmmakers make it abundantly clear that these people, Heather, Mike, and Josh, were real filmmakers who went to Maryland and got lost in the woods, and the footage that they recorded on their camcorders and their 16mm were discovered 1 year later by the authorities. So, right away, this film is oozing with realism, and when I watched it, it definitely feels real. You think that these people are actually stranded in the woods by themselves. They start breaking down, and the actors are phenomenal in this film. I don't remember the acting when I originally saw it, but it stood out to me because everything felt very authentic. There are some found footage films that don't stick to the found footage trend enough and kind of go off in its own direction, but Blair Witch is a good example of a horror film that sticks to what it is. It is a found footage documentary about these three amateur filmmakers and the legend of the Blair Witch. So let's talk about that titular character, the Blair Witch, for just a second, because I feel like that's the main reason of the controversy. So, to me, anyways, the Blair Witch Project comes down to one word: ambiguity. Ambiguity in horror is something that a lot of modern audiences don't see nowadays. What I mean by ambiguity is the mystery of the film and the lore, and not saying everything, because most of the time, less is more. It feels like nowadays you always have to see the beast, see the monster, see the gore, see the violence on screen. The Blair Witch Project hardly shows anything, in fact, and many people have argued that this film is rather boring, as I once thought it was. The scariest thing is a guy standing in the corner towards the very end of the film, the very iconic shot at the end of this movie. And other than that, there's a few sticks and a few rocks. There's no witch, there's no ghosts, there's barely any blood besides a tooth wrapped up in a little sack. There's not much in terms of direct horror. All of the horror is implied and left to the viewer's imagination to come up with the story as it goes. There is a legend of the Blair Witch, and the only difficult part in talking about this aspect of the film is that much of that was relied to via the internet back when the film came out in the 90s. The filmmakers and the studio put a lot of the information for the lore of the Blair Witch online and its original website, so a lot of that is harder to track down. There are some documentaries on it, but very simply put, there was an actual witch in the town of Burkittsville, which was once Blair. And fast forward a little bit, I'm not sure of the lineage of that witch, but I'm assuming she died. And there was a serial killer, a hermit in the woods named Rustin Parr. And he abducted children, and he would make one of them stand in the corner while he murdered the other. And that's kind of a symbolism to the very end of the film when you see, I think it's either, I'm pretty sure it's Mike who stands in the corner. Might be Josh, but I'm pretty sure it's Mike. Stands in the corner, and then, of course, the ending happens. I won't completely spoil it for you guys. But essentially, you have that mirrored image of Rustin Parr's murderous deeds from long ago, and the very modern tale with these characters, especially Heather encountering the horror that she does.
And they searched his house, and they found the bodies of 7 kids from the area.
What he did is he took the kids down in the basement by twos, and he made one face into the corner.
Really?
And then he would kill the other one. And then when he was done with that, he grabbed the one out of the corner and killed that one too.
And those were the 7 kids that were missing. And then they brought them out of the woods one at a time, and it just was a terrible thing. It just tore the whole community up.
Said in court that he couldn't take the eyes on him.
But that's not really portrayed that fluidly in the film. At the very beginning, there are some candid interviews with townsfolks who talk about the legend of the Blair Witch, and it feels very authentic and real, as if people sort of believe it and sort of don't. I like that, and I think it adds to the ambiguity of the Blair Witch, because at the end of the day, the main thing is, we never see the Blair Witch. So we don't know if there actually is a paranormal force in these woods, or if it's completely fabricated. Is there a cult in the woods of these crazy witch followers doing this to these people? Is it actually a witch and a ghost or a demon? Is it the characters doing it to themselves? It's very odd. And I like that it doesn't answer everything for you. It makes you piece together the story in your head. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Blair Witch Project has held up for so many years.
I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them.
There is no score or music to really talk about, only at the very beginning and the very end there is a little bit of ambient music, which adds to the tension of the film. I love the way that it's shot. It feels very authentic. It's been known to give people headaches, and sometimes you kind of have to look away while you're watching it because it is very shaky. But granted, this is kind of guerrilla filmmaking. This is in the elements. They went into the woods to shoot this, so it feels very much like it was actual found footage. And I respect that more than having cheap gimmicks to make it look found footage, but it's still sleek. This is very in your face. This is very real and gritty and dirty. And I love that it switches through different camera angles, different people and perspectives. There's the 16mm and some other camera lenses that they use throughout the film. And I think that's all great. The story comes together in a great way. Nothing feels forced. Everything feels like it makes sense and the characters act within their limits. And the characters really start to butt heads throughout the middle of the film. They start to hate each other, and you really see how people break down even when there's nothing in sight. There's no evil witch, there's no cult members coming at them. It's just three characters angry at each other because they're so hungry and deprived of sleep and of good health. And I think that's another reason why the Blair Witch Project has held up for so many years. So like I said, when I first saw the Blair Witch Project, I wasn't a big fan. I thought it was boring, you didn't see any monster or anything. But now, having rewatched it, I have a new respect for the film because of the ambiguity and the mystery that it creates. I like the tense story, I think the characters are all very realistic, and I now can appreciate and understand why the Blair Witch Project is so high regarded among fans. I'm not saying that this is the greatest horror film that I've ever seen, but if you haven't seen the Blair Witch Project, perhaps check it out. It's very tense, it's very creepy, and it will leave you wanting more. And the best part is, there's nothing more to add. Except those darn sequels. Oh well. The Blair Witch Project still holds up, even from 1999. Overall, I'm going to give the Blair Witch Project a 4 out of 5 skulls on the R.I.P. Reviews rating scale. If you like found footage flicks, let me know which one is your favorite in the comments down below, and what do you think of the Blair Witch Project? Thank you for watching, and remember, as always, for all things Halloween, this is Hauntformer.